Joining us today is another director whose film is being featured as part of NorthWestFest. It's Pamela Tanner Boll, director and executive producer of the film To Which We Belong. It's playing as part of NorthWestFest from Thursday, May 6th until Sunday, May 16th. And as is the case with all films at the festival, you can stream them at northwestfest.ca. Pamela, let's let the audience know about how this film looks at a revolution that lies in the soil and the seas and regenerative agriculture and regenerative ocean farming.
Yes, it is a revolution. We've been growing food as human beings for hundreds of thousands of years. Well, maybe 10,000 for actual. That's where farming began, where we took the seeds and planted them. And during much of that time, we've done certain things. We've cleared the land, we've plowed it, and we've put the seeds in the ground and made sure that nothing else grew around it. In the last 100 years or so, what we've done is really use those methods with machinery so that the land has been plowed, cleared, and seeds in. What we didn't realize was that by doing so, we were destroying the integrity of the soil, and also therefore the fertility of the soil, and also the water holding capacity of the soil. So the longer we've plowed, the longer we've kept dirt uncovered in our agricultural lands, the less fertile it has been. What the revolution is on the land and in the sea is that the more plants you have growing on the soil and in the ocean year round, that's the key, not just your crops in the summer, the more carbon dioxide you bring down through photosynthesis, 8th grade, remember, you can bring down that carbon dioxide. Now, why is that important? It's carbon that feeds the microorganisms in the soil, and guess what? That is what creates the nutrition of the plants and also the fertility of the soil. So you don't want a bare ground and you don't want to plow. It destroys all the underground life. Now that life is the microorganisms that are down there. There's hundreds of thousands. And when you start to use the biology of the soil and also the ocean, you don't need to rely heavily on chemical fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides.
Yeah, this film I loved because I was like, the depth to which you really examine this is so impressive. And because I'm sure there must have been a level of intimidation at first because the information just seems so heavy because it goes against so much of the information that we've heard before. It's eye-opening. The statement that, if we can increase carbon levels around the world by just 2% on agricultural lands, our food problem is solved and our climate change problem is gone. What has been the reaction to that from audiences? Is there a certain level of skepticism, or are they kind of like, it seems like an easy thing to do, but it's not? And you're like, it is easy. We just got to commit to it.
Well, the audiences love the film. The science is there. Dr. Ratan Lal, who's in his, I believe, 70s, maybe early 80s, has been doing soil science for most of his life, and he runs a carbon information center at Ohio State University. He's just been given some hugely important prize for these discoveries. So the science is there. Where we have the skepticism, there's a couple of things. One is, can we really as human beings get on board of that 2% or even 4% worldwide? This requires a fair degree of cooperation, and it requires more than that. It requires people who are in the land business of growing food and also in the oceans to change the way they do things. For most of the last 60 years, since the Second World War, the agricultural schools have said, soil's just something that you stick the plants in. And the fertility comes from the fertilizer. Okay. That was what's taught. It's still taught. I mean, it wasn't what our forefathers and foremothers knew 200 years ago, but that looked like a big mess. I mean, back then you would use every bit of the animal for fertilizer. You'd use the manure, and when the animals died, you'd bury the bones. And that just seems like old stuff. What we found is those old ways have been actually validated by new science. And that's the revolution. It's not just folk tales anymore. And it's in the ocean. What's really interesting is you can grow kelp, which you can actually grow it, and it draws down carbon dioxide faster than anything else on the land. And then you can harvest the kelp and you can use it to amend the soil, to add a little bit more richness and fertility to the soil. And you can also feed it to cows, for example, which pretty much does away with their methane issue, which is an issue. That's a bad gas to be emitting. But here's the thing. When you do cattle on grasses instead of on grains and feedlots, those methane gases are eaten up by, again, some of the microorganisms in the soil. It's like meant to be that way. So it works. People are getting on board. Every country, this is big, big news at the UN. It's big news around the world. But, we need to move. We need to do it. And our country is taking the lead under the new administration. This is on their agenda. But I didn't want to get political. I wanted to show that this works if you're in a desert, if you're in the mountains, if you're on the ocean, if you are in a very green, rainy place like Kenya or Maryland. And I wanted to show that no matter where you were, this works.
That's one aspect I really loved about the film, is that you reach beyond the borders of the U.S. by going to farms in Mexico and Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
So why was it so important for you to kind of look at that much broader scope and to get beyond the borders of the U.S.?
Because I think that this has to be regenerative agriculture is now becoming a common name for these practices. It's a sort of basket of practices which are not plowing. You plant directly into the soil with just a little, and not never leaving your fields uncovered. So you always have cover crops in between the cash crops. And for grasslands, you let the cattle go and eat the grass, which is what they're supposed to do, but they mimic the herds of bison and the wildebeest, et cetera, in Africa. Instead of just staying in one place and eating everything down to the nub, you keep them moving. So you're mimicking these old patterns, and then that brings richness of grasses back. So it has to be around the world. I mean, Africa is a continent that is on the verge in some places of becoming desert. We all know this. As the temperature rises around the world, we're having more deserts. Desertification is the real word. But with these practices, especially running cattle, or you can also do goats, across these lands, you can actually reverse the desertification. In Kenya, where we were visiting with the Maasai, who are cattle herders from way back, they found that 1 year after they'd started doing this, the grass cover in this area had been 20% and it went up to 70%. Excuse me, that's pretty exciting in my opinion. In Mexico was a desert. It's the Chihuahuan Desert. Same thing. Everyone looks at it and it's like, you can't grow anything here except for mesquite and cactus, right? But in the past, it had been grasslands. So the reason we went to those two places was to show that even in somewhat extreme or areas, it works. And once you have a certain amount of carbon in the soil, 1% per acre, you get 25,000 gallons of water holding capacity. We need this right now. I didn't want it just to be a US centered, oh, look, the US can do this. No, it can be done everywhere.
Is the real hurdle for you with a film like this the fact that the dismantling of industrial agriculture, or is the fact that maybe it contradicts what people have gotten so used to doing or believing about the way that, farming or larger agricultural farms need to work and operate? What's been the biggest hurdle for you?
I think the biggest, well, for one thing, I think one of the big hurdles is people think land, I don't have anything to do with land. I'm not a farmer. I'm not a rancher. How does that impact me? And I'll tell you another thing. I don't make the industrialized or the conventional agriculturalists the enemy. We have in our film lots of people talking about how we went through various stages. Industrialized agriculture gave us the green revolution. It was a boon. We grew more food under that system of fertilizer than we ever had been able to. We ended hunger. It wasn't that it was bad. It's that it couldn't continue. You just can't expect the lands to produce and produce and produce year in and year out. You have to keep adding more fertilizer. And then you have to add herbicides and pesticides. And guess what? Farmers are actually pretty interested in this because it affects their bottom line. The consumers aren't that interested. What is more interesting to me and to them is these women who are doing this work. They're kind of courageous, but unsung. And they're making a difference in our climate picture. Nobody wants to actually talk about the climate. It's too big. We read articles, but as individuals, it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? This is something that you can get behind. You can support these people who are working in this regenerative manner. You can support the organizations that are helping them. You can buy grass-fed beef. You can buy, and it's good for our health. That is also in the film. It is better for humans to be eating this way. Our industrialized agriculture has caused some problems. A lot of farmers who work in this field are sick by the time they're in their 60s, really sick. Now, what's it doing to us when you feed the animals hormones and other chemicals, or if they're eating things that are chemically saturated? Really, it's not good for us. The old argument was that you could never grow enough food without these chemicals. The new argument in regenerative is, guess what? Not only can you grow as much food, in some cases you can increase your yields. We can feed more people. This is why it's so exciting. Anyway, the audience response has been kind of interesting because it's a little hard to get people in, but once they're in, they're crying. They're like so excited. I mean, we've had great audience response. And also, my way of storytelling, I don't follow somebody for 5 years. There's many films that do that, as you well know. I want to tell a kind of essay style, but the people that we have in this film, I think people fall in love with them or their life. Yeah.
And I would agree completely. And that's, I think, what is the beauty of the film is that, the level of humanity that you've injected into it, as well as balancing it with the idea of completely rethinking how people look at agriculture, or at least maybe what their perceptions of it were. And whether that's you're from the inside looking at it or from the outside, it's really fascinating. And that's a tough balance to strike. Sometimes you alienate an audience with bombardment of facts, but you're a pro, Pamela. So it's
Yeah.
you've got a very good resume. So yourself, Lindsay Richardson, your co-director, and also Paula Kirk, your producer, have done a fantastic job with this film. And I envision people seeing it for years to come as this movement grows.
Mhm. I hope so. I think it will. Thank you.
Yeah, Pamela Tanner Boyle has been our guest, director, executive producer of the film To Which We Belong. It's playing, of course, as part of NorthWestFest from Thursday, May 6th till Sunday, May 16th. And you can stream it, as you can with all films, at northwestfest.ca.